Good afternoon to all of you from India. My name is Rajkumar. I'm the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. Good evening to our friends in Australia, as well as in New Zealand and others. Good morning for those of you watching us from North America and Canada. It is indeed my proud privilege to welcome all of you to the third day of the Global Virtual Conference on Reimagining and Transforming the Future of Law Schools and Legal Education. It's indeed my proud privilege to particularly welcome all of you to the 27th thematic session of this conference on the theme, Placements and Recruitments Against Uncertain Industry Conditions. I have with us a very distinguished group of individuals who are leaders in their own right, who have contributed to various aspects of institution building in different countries. We also have a young lawyer with us who will also share his own perspectives from the vantage point of an early entrant into the legal profession. Let me begin by warmly welcoming Professor Dr. Lisa Webley, Chair in Legal Education and Research, Head Birmingham Law School at the University of Birmingham, United Kingdom, Professor ERIK, Professor at the Tilburg Law School, Tilburg University at the Netherlands, Barrister Dr. KHALED CHOWDHURY, Head of the London College of Legal Studies in Bangladesh, Mr. SHREEYASH LALIT, Advocate in the Supreme Court of India, and of course, my own distinguished colleague, Professor Dr. VESSELIN POPOVSKI, Vice Dean of the Jindal Global Law School at OP Jindal Global University, India. The issue of placements, recruitments, internships, indeed career aspirations of bright law graduates across the country and around the world have been fundamentally shaken due to the COVID-19 crisis. We believe that this is one of the important issues that is worthy of discussions in a conference that focuses on legal education. And that was the reason for us to include this as a part of the panel discussion. I'm going to give this panel to Professor Popovsky. I'll be coming back shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. My pleasure to chair this panel on such a crucial topic, as the Vice Chancellor said, the placement and recruitment in time of uncertainty of the legal profession. In fact, I must say the uncertainty was even before COVID-19. The profession has been already changing before that, and it was mostly due to the technological advance, to the artificial intelligence. If you remember, Yuval Harari in his book Homo Deus and 21st Lesson to 21st Century already signaled that the future of jobs will be very much different from what we had in the past. The nature of jobs is changing. The what he called even the useless class, some people will need to get to reskill in order to get employed again. And that has been very much the case also with the legal profession, which has been changing for the last, I must say, 15, 20 years already, due mostly to the technological changes and artificial intelligence. But the COVID-19 brought this into a kind of acceleration. We've seen, I saw recent numbers that 18% more unemployment in the United States, 14% more unemployment in Europe, 12% more unemployment in Asia. So the COVID-19 really cut jobs, but also presented with an opportunity, as I must say, to think about the future of jobs, and in particular in the legal profession. So how did the legal industry, but also the law schools responded, and what else they need to do to respond better? Many things have changed, but what did not change is the need for justice. So let's put it this way. The legal profession actually probably would become even more important because the idea of justice, the equality, the access to legal services, the legal empowerment of vulnerable groups of people will be even more demanding exactly because of the difficulties in which COVID-19 presented us. So because the need for justice is there, the need for profession is there, but how will the profession react? And what kind of new graduates we need to create in the law schools. And I'm speaking on behalf of Jindal Global Law School, which, by the way, undertook quite effective way of, for example, recruiting back some of our graduates. We offered graduate scholarships and teaching fellowships to many of our graduates, and they now work on the research projects with our faculty. So we have been quite dynamic and innovative in that way. We have an excellent panel, which the Vice Chancellor already introduced. And if you permit me, I will go by your first names, KHALED, SHREEYASH, ERIK, and Lisa. That will be probably easy also for our audience. And to ask you first to tell us your overall impression of the impact of the pandemic on the legal industry and on the recruitment and placement in particular. Shall I go with the order we are given in the program, if you don't mind? So let's start with Dr. KHALED first, please.
First and foremost, I'm thankful to respected Professor Dr. Rajkumar, the founding Vice Chancellor, and his esteemed team at the OP Zindal Global University for arranging these magnificent sessions of learning and sharing, and for inviting me to be a part of the same. Of course, it's a very pertinent issue. There is no doubt that every sphere of life has been impacted by COVID-19. The law schools, admissions, placements, and recruitments are no exception. Now, in Bangladesh, from our own perspective, I can tell you, share our story. In Bangladesh, the Supreme Court announced a holiday in all courts after the government imposed a lockdown way back in 26th of March to curb the spread of the virus, and virtual court proceedings only began on the 9th of May. And that was after an ordinance was passed, followed by an act of parliament. Even then, a significant number of legal professionals who are not equipped or adept in using technology have been affected. Many of them also did not have the chambers or setup to make use of the online system promptly. As an aftermath, I think a good number of chambers were also closed, and some began working remotely, facing up the challenge. This meant loss of jobs, loss of income, and wage cuts in legal arena. The other traditional or additional problem for the young aspiring advocates in Bangladesh is that we have this examination for qualifying as an advocate in Bangladesh, which for one reason or the other has become less frequent, lengthier, and time consuming. We have this rule where there should be 2 exams every year for the Bar Council intake, but unfortunately this has not happened frequently. It takes place in 3 phases like MCQ, written, and Viva. And it has sometimes taken a couple of years to complete even one single process. So according to a private survey, we had 60,000 examinees appearing in the Bar Council exam in 2017. And the previous exams were only held in 2015. And only 7,200 students passed. And after that, many of them actually sat idle waiting for the written examination. Now, without having a license to practice independently, many graduates will have no choice but to work in chambers for a very low pay or no pay. They do not have the option to work as legal counsels, as many multinational enterprises or banks have a prerequisite that you must have a license to practice first before you join them. So in terms of student placement in overseas universities, I must say the situation is not that bleak, though. My institute, LCLS South, we are affiliated with many number of reputed universities. According to the statistics, we have actually seen some increase in enrollments and transfer applications. And one of the reasons is because, in Europe, they are now offering some post-study work opportunity for the graduates. So many people feel that after the Brexit, perhaps students from Bangladesh might be able to get better work opportunities in the UK and to recoup their expenses. And due to the unprecedented times and crises, of course, students are also in huge dilemma and they often get demotivated. We constantly try to engage our students via emails, calls, Facebook live sessions to guide them through the application and visa process. And we have international open days every year. Representatives from the universities would come and meet the students. We could not do one this year, but hope to do something virtually soon. To wrap up with a few of statistics, it's quite interesting that we have, 104 universities in Bangladesh, 33 or so public and 71 private. We currently have around 850,000 students seeking higher qualifications, and public universities would account for 450 and private universities around 400,000. What is interesting, and from my own experience as an adjunct professor of a number of other universities, I can tell that private universities more promptly adapted to the use of technology, because the students could afford to pay more. They have a more infrastructure or a budget. Unfortunately, public universities, due to their budget, lack of infrastructure, lack of technology, they suffered in a big way. And the academic proceedings came to a complete halt. Hence, many have argued that this has created an incoherence and somewhat discrimination among students, which is actually not their fault. You know what I mean? So obviously, that was, many people thought it was pretty unwise to start online classes too promptly. And you have costly data packages, lack of digital devices, including smartphones and laptops. And many students had to go to remote area, and they had no chance to avail themselves of those opportunities, despite the fact they were students of private universities. So this has been a major learning and a major challenge, which I hope we can recover and shape up post-pandemic in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khaled, for this excellent, comprehensive tour de l'horizon, as the French say, in the situation, not only in Bangladesh, but generally about the certification of the legal profession and the expectations that are created on one side, but also the preparedness of the candidates to enter into the legal job. And actually, this is a good way to move now to SHREEYASH, who will speak next to tell us a little bit more about the Supreme Court of India and generally the legal profession in the Indian context. What has been the challenge over the last 9 months, and how did the profession, the legal industry, respond, and what are the expectations for the future? Please.
Thank you, Professor POPOVSKI, Barrister Choudhury, Professor VERMEULEN, Professor WEBLEY, and other dignitaries. I would say that legal professions, like other businesses and industries, are obviously facing novel and unfamiliar challenges. And we have been significantly affected by social restrictions, and many firms are receiving, or at least seeing, reduced client demand. And that has naturally been because of a variety of factors. Especially when we look at the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court of India has passed an order dated 15th March 2020. It's actually dated later, but the limitation starts from 15th March. What it has said in its order is that all filings that are to be done before the Honorable Supreme Court will stand extended insofar as the period of limitation is concerned. Now, that has a significant bearing insofar as filing before the Supreme Court is concerned. So what has really happened is clients have also, there is also a sense of lethargy that has set in clients. Over and above that, naturally businesses have been hit. So on account of reduced profits, on account of reduced receivables, what we are really seeing in terms of legal advice that has been sought from lawyers is, say, for example, insofar as breach of fiduciary duties, a breach of contracts due to force majeure or frustration, or say, for example, disputes related to the relationship between creditors and debtors. That is the fundamental issue here, is that legal assistance is being sought to protect clients from deterioration of wealth and not towards generation of wealth. And as a result of that, what we are seeing is that there is, as you know, President Ronald Reagan put it once, there's a trickle-down economics of sorts. And because of this trickle-down effect, because businesses are not doing well, as a result of that, lawyers are also not doing well. And this is, at least when I speak about the civil or commercial side of litigation. When you look at the criminal side of litigation, what we see is the Supreme Court really stepping in and trying to protect liberty in as many cases as possible. There is, for example, a situation where several high courts across the country have, in fact, released these high-level committee orders. As under the high-level committee, what is supposed to happen is several judges in those high courts have sat together and they have decided, they have formulated certain parameters. Those parameters will guide as to when and how interim bail will be granted to under trial prisoners. And that is also further accentuated and possibly exacerbated by the fact that you have now COVID-19 spreading through prisons itself. And we have so many under trial prisoners who are packed, and there are prisons who are up to the brim. As a result of that, what is really happening is that the Honorable Supreme Court and several high courts across the country have really stepped in that arena and have tried to mitigate the problems faced by accused persons under trials as much as possible. So insofar as bail jurisprudence is concerned, suddenly we have seen a complete dynamic shift in how bail should be granted, should not be granted. Whenever, say, there are a couple of matters that have come to the Supreme Court where, although bails have not been granted in the high courts, but Supreme Court has stepped out of its way to grant those bails. So insofar as criminal side of litigation is concerned, that seems to be how the Supreme Court is, really taking the matters head on. Now, then there are several other issues to this, to the side of litigation. But when we talk about profession, when we talk about the legal profession, naturally it has had its downturns. And the reason for that, again, is because not a lot of lawyers have the infrastructural capacity. When you speak about the real legal profession, they are the people who are working on the ground, the people who are, say, for example, practicing in trial courts, right? Trials are not able to happen because, again, production warrants cannot be issued to the inmates. They cannot be produced before the court. Evidence cannot happen because then you cannot ask the prosecution witnesses to appear before the court. So trials are they have somehow hit a complete standstill across India. And as a result of that, naturally, the concomitant effect is that obviously accused persons have been receiving bails left, right, center, but criminal justice system, if you look at that, criminal justice system has hit a roadblock because, again, trials are not happening. And this again then affects the legal profession. The reason being that because, again, work is not really happening in the trial courts. So then how is a layman supposed to, how is, even a person practicing in the trial court supposed to earn a salary? So this has had, there are effects that are coming across from several quarters. There are effects insofar as civil commercial litigation is concerned. There are effects insofar as criminal litigation is concerned. And we have all faced the brunt of this COVID pandemic. But if you look at the legal profession, there are several ways out of it. And we will talk about that as the topics come up.
Yes, thank you, Shreeyash, for giving us this excellent insight of how within the profession different sectors will be affected in different manner. And also something interesting you kind of brought my mind into is the so-called legal fraternity. The idea that the profession is not a simple judgment, but also it includes a lot of emotional behavior and empathy to the various groups of people, to the vulnerable people, and even, as you mentioned, even the accused during the process, the criminal trials. The due process and the right of the accused are also important issues to bear in mind in such times. What COVID-19 is actually testing is also the human-human relationship, and it is very connected to the legal profession. And we see kind of good stories and bad stories in different countries in terms of approach to minorities, for example. But obviously in time of crisis, there is a need for solidarity and fraternity. Now let's move to Europe. We have two excellent speakers, one from Birmingham, Lisa, and one from Tilburg, Erik. to tell us a little bit more about how United Kingdom and Netherlands, or your own institutions, responded to the COVID-19 crisis, and what are the problems in terms of recruitment of law graduates, and how did your institution assisted your graduates? Please, shall we start with Erik?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. So yeah, let me explain a bit about myself first. So yes, I'm a law professor at Tilburg University, but I'm also a practitioner. I work at a company called Signify, which was formerly known as Philips Lighting, the light bulbs and electronics company. So I'm both a practitioner and academic. And what happened was actually the following. It all started, so first university. So we had we started with a lockdown in March, and many of our students already got a job offer. And what happened was, and they had job offers at law firms and companies. What happened was that many of these job offers were, they disappeared. They could not hire them because of the pandemic. Companies, it was a lot of uncertainty. Companies had to make choices. Law firms had to make choices. And they said, well, sorry, we don't hire anybody right now in uncertainty. So that was a group of students that we had, that graduated in May, June 2020. And that's a huge problem for them because they expected a job and all of a sudden there wasn't anything anymore. And it was too late for them to get an internship. So they struggle. We still help them. They come to me, let's say, weekly, trying to open doors for them. But it's extremely difficult. Then we all hoped that it would all disappear during the summer, but it didn't. And the university, well, we reacted fast. Everything was online. So that was good. Then we moved to August. The new year starts. Everything's still online. Pandemic still there. And what now happens is that the lawyers, they are extremely busy in Europe, at least in the Netherlands. It's busier than ever. Reason is we had to change the way we work. All of a sudden, everything is online. All the meetings are online. And this sounds weird, but it means that we are busier. We have more meetings now. We don't change rooms. We don't change buildings. So we just sit here and do basically back-to-back online Zoom meetings all day long as a practitioner, which is difficult. Then the courts, they moved more and more things online, but that was weird for them. So they had to adapt. So that made it busier. Then businesses, they need a lot of help. Because of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty, contracts could not be performed, so lots of work. We had new applications for testing and figuring out who was infected or not. All law firms, I know many lawyers who are involved in this. I work at Philips Lighting. We all of a sudden saw that there was a new opportunity, as you mentioned, because the pandemic also brought new opportunities. People wanted to have light bulbs that could disinfect. And that means that we all of a sudden have a new product, and lawyers within my company, they are extremely busy with making this happen because companies cannot wait anymore. So the legal profession, well, everything accelerated, but they don't hire. And that's a problem. It's a problem for universities because I am the director of an international business law program, and I cannot, all these people, they need to have jobs, but it's pretty difficult to find them. The good news is, though, that since October, so since last month, we see more and more internships again. So law firms and companies start to open up for internships, particularly internships, because of the uncertainty. They cannot offer them a job, not even a temporary job, but interns are very, very welcome. And this is very interesting because they understand now that they need lawyers with a different skill set. And that's where we universities come in. So I'm changing my program completely. I still focus on legal thinking, but I'm now incorporating creative thinking, critical thinking, digital thinking, collaborative thinking, community thinking, design thinking. Because believe it or not, this legal design, I know many companies that are now rethinking the way they communicate with consumers. So for instance, the general terms and conditions have to be rewritten. And what they need is they need lawyers that have a different skill set. And that's where the internships come in. So what I see now is that because I market, okay, I put my program in the market as something innovative. And what you see is that many of my students get internships because of the new skill set. So what I see happening, just as a summary, is that the legal profession changed. They understand it. They don't want to hire yet, but they open up for internships. But you see that they want to have lawyers with different skill set. And I think that's where law schools should come in. If we just continue to offer the same program to the students, but we can move it online, but that's not what we should do. We should really rethink, let's say, the legal programs, legal study, teach different skills. And then I think there will be a very bright future for lawyers, as you mentioned, because the world will change. It happened already, as you also mentioned, before the pandemic. We had a digital transformation, but that's kind of accelerating right now. So if law schools are really smart, they can actually define the future, the legal future for the students. And we can make sure that our students will get jobs, because there's a lot of demand for a lawyer with a new skill set. And that's what we see. So I see a bright future. The only problem that I have is for the students that graduated last year. I still have to help them a lot, but we will figure it out. We do the same thing as you. We hire them, we offer them positions, assistant, teacher positions in order to get them going. But yeah, I think for them, it will be a bright future.
This is very encouraging to hear your positive approach and thinking that actually for the legal profession and for our graduates, there is a bright future. I fully agree. And also the way you describe how you change your teaching in order to prepare those future lawyers is quite impressive. We will come back to that in future questions, definitely. Let's move to Birmingham. I know the University of Birmingham is one of the biggest not only in the United Kingdom, but in Europe. And it is also regarded as a city that will probably have a lot of employment coming from London and from the rest of England. It will be the central hub of jobs. A lot of big companies already moved from London to Birmingham, by the way. I've heard from my real estate agent who is pushing me to buy an apartment and say, this is the best investment you can have in Birmingham, particularly after the bullet train, which will take Londoners to Birmingham and back 49 minutes. So I'm excited to hear how Birmingham and the university reacted to COVID, and how do you feel, Lisa, about the future of the recruitment and placement in the law school in particular, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm absolutely delighted and to be able to speak with such a great panel. Thank you. So I think on the whole, the position is not so dissimilar to the Netherlands, but perhaps slightly more positive in the context of recruitment, partly as a result of a national scheme that was put in place by the government called the furlough scheme, which supports salaries up to 80% if people need to be furloughed because of lockdown style conditions or restrictions, national restrictions placed on the ability for people to be able to work as normal. So I'll start with education and then I'll move through to the legal profession, if I may. So the University of Birmingham, in keeping, I think, with an awful lot of universities in the UK, I don't think our position was so dissimilar, had a 3-week scramble in March to move all of our activities online. Now, some universities in the UK were already extremely well set up to do a lot of what they did at a distance. They'd invested very heavily in technology, and they were ready. They'd already been doing a fair bit of that. My university had a good infrastructure for using technology, but it also had a culture of campus-based activity, and that's partly because our university's got a beautiful campus and we want to make full use of it. And so whilst all of our support mechanisms were accessible at a distance online, and we already had very well developed virtual learning environments, which most institutions in the UK and around Europe would have anyway. We were still pretty reliant on everybody turning up at campus for the in-person, face-to-face sessions. And in a 3-week period, I explain that I think the law school and the university went through 3 years worth of accelerated growth in terms of being able to move all of his activities online. So that wasn't just about the actual teaching going online, which we could do relatively, I would say relatively straightforward. It certainly wasn't straightforward. It was very stressful for absolutely everybody concerned. It was stressful partly because it means you suddenly doing things a bit differently. We have a very international community in Birmingham Law School. So a third of our students are overseas, students from outside Europe, and we do have a good number of European students. And in that 3-week period, many of them took the opportunity to head home to family because of the uncertainty and not knowing how safe it would be to remain, and not knowing whether if they delayed they would be able to go back to their home countries. It meant that we ended up with a community that had all been on the same time zone, because the UK has a single time zone, unlike I know many other countries in the world, to having a community that spanned from the furthest time zone in Canada through to Australia. And so all of a sudden we had a gathered community gathering electronically for classes across whole different time zones. And so we had some adjustments to make there, which were clunky, they weren't very elegant, which we managed to sort out in time for this academic year, where we now have most of our students making choices to study entirely online. So we can offer some on-campus teaching in very small groups for those who came to Birmingham, wanted to be in Birmingham, or who felt that they studied better with some face-to-face classes. So we can guarantee some of that. But many of our community have stayed in their home countries and are studying entirely remotely. So we managed to do that quite quickly. It wasn't very elegant to begin with. It has got much more robust since. But also all the extracurricular activities that we offer also got moved online. And so we've still managed to do our full mooting schedule. All of that's now online. We've still managed to do our pro bono work. We have we have 15 pro bono schemes at Birmingham Law School. We've managed to move all of that online. And over the course of the summer, we managed to do that. And it's a model which in some respects, for some activities, works a little better than our former model did. It's also meant that we've been able to integrate some of the digital skills work, which we probably needed to do more on anyway, into the experience of our law students, simply because we've needed to do that to support them and to support our faculty and the practitioners who come and provide some of the pro bono opportunities and the mooting and advocacy opportunities. We've managed to provide support for that too. Now, in terms of job opportunities, I think one of the things that we were really staggered by was that the law firm communities and the barristers' chambers that were also going through this digital transformation at the same time as us in their working lives didn't cancel the opportunities they'd offered to students, the unpaid opportunities, the placements in terms of, the work experience placements, the shadowing placements. They simply took all of those online too. And they did it straight away. It was just astonishing what they managed to achieve. And so larger numbers of students were given the opportunity to take part in virtual placements because they didn't have quite the same space constraints that they would have if they needed people physically to turn up. And so the legal profession in March in England and Wales particularly, but actually around the whole of the UK, just went online. Everybody stayed at home because we went into a national lockdown. By the time we'd reached April, law firms had worked out ways to be able to get law students and trainees to be able to work online. And so more placements were offered rather than fewer, which was just astonishing, utterly astonishing. And a lot of the law firms said that they were able to offer opportunities to people that they wouldn't, because it was so competitive, they wouldn't necessarily have been able to offer opportunities to, because they only had 10 spots available, and all of a sudden they could offer twice that. And many of the students have said, well, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate in this number of placements, and we've had multiple opportunities. I think coming to the legal profession itself, that one of the things that supported many aspects of professional life and other forms of business in the UK was a decision taken by the UK government to support salaries, to pay furlough payments if businesses kept their staff employed. So as long as law firms could continue to pay 20% of the salary of their staff, 80% would be paid up to a level, up to a certain maximum salary level, would be paid for all staff. And what those staff who were furloughed weren't allowed to do was to do fee earning work for their firms. That was a condition of the furlough. But what they could do is retraining. That was permissible. So they could spend their time on retraining. They could spend their time doing non-fee earning work, so doing outreach work. And so what we saw was law firms saying to their staff, if we furlough you, we would like you to use this time, rather than you sitting at home, because people were locked down for a long period of time, rather than you sitting at home, we would like you to, if you can, take up the opportunity of retraining, to be able to think through things we could do differently in our firms at a later date, think about how we can support the next generation of lawyers. And so a huge amount of time and energy, I think, has been put into reimagining how to do things. The trainees that were due to start in law firms were taken on as normal, because they could be taken on and furloughed. As long as they had a contract of employment already set up, they could be taken into the firm. And law firms didn't, as long as they could pay 20% of the salary, law firms didn't want to lose the opportunity of that talent, knowing that they could get them in. They couldn't use them for fee earning work. But of course, those trainee lawyers could offer something back somewhere else. And so in some ways, a series of decisions taken not by law schools, but by others, has allowed, I think, some space. The furlough scheme has been extended. It's been changed a bit, but it's been extended till March next year. So a group of graduates who at the moment are being still hired ready. So virtual law fairs are going ahead. Law firms are still recruiting. Barristers' chairs are still taking pupil barristers. The courts have switched to online proceedings, some of which are really problematic, some of which are working very effectively. So in some respects, we've seen an opportunity to accelerate changes that were probably going to take 5 to 10 years in quite a short period of time. Having said that, the psychological well-being of our law students, huge uncertainty and huge uncertainty is very, very difficult to live with over a long period of time. And so whilst the future may appear bright to those of us who are employed and who are able to see some of the recent graduates progressing, those students who are still in education are understandably worried about what will happen in 2021, 2022. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Lisa, and very happy to hear that indeed what we have been thinking and reading is already happening somewhere in Birmingham quite well. This flexibility and openness for innovation and reimagination of the job, this, what you mentioned, the recalibrating the skills into new skills, retraining students so that they are be able to face those challenges in terms of flexible jobs, in terms of working part-time somewhere, working in a hybrid model, helping a particular project in one firm, but remaining interning in another project. So all of this will definitely, as we see, be the future of the legal profession. It will be not simply 9 to 5, one office, commuting from home. It will involve all the possible flexibility, time flexibility, and so on. But also what is interesting in Birmingham is what you mentioned about the internationalization. A lot of students are coming from abroad, and will that be affected? So we will get back to that later. What I would like to go back to KHALED and SHREEYASH is to tell us a little bit more about how do you see the technology-driven legal profession, and how the legal profession will, what will the legal offices will expect from the graduates in time of COVID? I will assume, because we teach online and students study online, the jobs, a lot of them, as you mentioned before, are moving online. A lot of courts, a lot of judges will also operate online. So students being prepared in one mode probably will be also suitable to move to a similar mode, moving from a university to the legal profession. What do you think about it, Khaled?
Thank you. I think that the silver lining of the pandemic is that it has taught us, of course, some valuable lessons. As we see from the discussion, the functioning of the virtual courts, it has paved the way for access to justice, is one of the few blessings. And we all know Professor Richard Susskind of Oxford University, author of a number of bestsellers, who has been an ardent advocate for the dominance of artificial intelligence in the legal profession and for transformation of court based on technology for almost 40 years. And he has always stressed on how technology is needed to replace our practices in the past and the present, of course. However, the need for digital or remote courts was only realized by us, I think, after the pandemic really hit us badly. And huge credit, I think, also goes to the efforts made by, I think, the Society of Computers and the Law. They have created a site of remote courts which consolidates plans, ideas, policies, protocols, techniques, and safeguards to manage remote courts by different countries. And I believe we are all learning from each other's successes and failures to accelerate the development of innovative methods of access to justice that is ensured for all. Now, on that note, lawyers and judges in Bangladesh, of course, we are in dire need of technical support and training so the system may function more effectively. In addition to that, I think we could involve case managers who would have the role to identify the most suitable form of hearing at different stages of each case. Like a case management meeting might be held for an audio hearing, but when evidence is being heard, the video hearing might be deemed more preferable. It is also, I think, pertinent that we invest in research and development to find ways on how the online platforms could be improved or enhanced with a focus on functionality, usability, accessibility, and for all, be it for virtual courts or online dispute resolution. And I think the pandemic has given us this food for thought that court should not only be the forum to seek justice. We should also change our mindset. So when it comes to litigation and promote ADR, ODR to ensure better access to justice, as the problem relating to backlog of cases is here to remain. In fact, I think the word alternative is a misnomer, and I believe that ADR, ODR should be the preferred method to resolve disputes over traditional courts. And in Bangladesh, with the current population of 170 million, we have got like 4.5 million cases with Supreme Court only based in Dhaka, without any of its benches sitting elsewhere in the country. We are facing a monumental problem of access to justice becoming increasingly narrower. In our country, mediation was introduced in civil cases in 2003, but it is yet to be made mandatory. Arbitration is, of course, we all know it's complicated. Sometimes it's very expensive and costly, and it might lead to a lot of time. It's dominated by a few in the legal profession. So I would strongly advocate to promote an ADR, ODR culture. So it's imperative that we encourage young and experienced lawyers about ADR, ODR and provide them with the necessary training. Law schools, I think, will have a role to play here. We should start teaching our students early on that litigation should not be the preferred or promoted method of dispute resolution. At the undergrad level, I think they should be familiarized with the online dispute resolution and given the practical knowledge. And we at our institute, along with a few sets of chambers, we have created an online platform to not only train our students in all forms of ADR, ODR, but mediation, negotiation, arbitration, negotiation, all aspects are being taught with the finer aspects. We're also encouraging students to go for pro bono ADR services, which I think is very important. We have corporate partners with ADR, ODR International, we provide courses online, and at the same time, these courses are accredited by the CMC UK, CME Singapore, and also IMI. To sum it up, I think that the graduates should be trained and educated to become digital dispute management specialists, DDRS. I think that is where the future lies. We have to make them prepare not only for the how to survive now, but post-COVID-19, to think digitally and to sell what the clients would actually buy. Because the world is moving so fast elsewhere. Why the legal profession will slow down like this? This is actually an enigma to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khaled. This is really interesting how much in Bangladesh, in the context of Bangladesh, things are moving into the right direction, as you said, and quickly responses, but also efficient responses are very valuable. Let me move back to Shreeyash. He mentioned many things, but I want him to extrapolate on those as well and tell us a little bit more about the legal profession, the Supreme Court of India, other courts, how the technology helped to recruit in a more flexible way, as we're talking now, and what are the challenges in the next year, 2021? Please, yes. Shreeyash.
Thank you so much. So I think in terms of how proceedings are being conducted in the Supreme Court as well as the High Court, we all know that they've all shifted to the online mode. They're all conducting online proceedings. Senior lawyers are appearing all across the country. And therefore, as a result of that, because everyone has slowly but surely shifted to the online mode, where conferences are being done online, files are being exchanged online, right? Everything is being done online. You have PDFs, now you have PDF readers, you are installing bookmarks on those PDFs instead of actually physically tagging those files when you're submitting it before the court. If, say, for example, if you were to take out a judgment, you just take it out from, say, Westlaw or any other journal, rather than printing it out and then physically submitting it before the court. So in terms of the legal profession, I personally love it. But when you look at the real ground reality, I think there are a lot of people who do not have the infrastructural facilities. Now, having said that, how exactly is a student supposed to get attuned to these kind of new developments? Now, I would say that as a university, like, say, for example, Jindal, would definitely have the infrastructural facilities to make that transition soon and make that transition quick. But if you look at other educational institutions, what you would need is in terms of infrastructure, for example, to help a student move towards an online system and move towards that in a better manner. I think what I would suggest is that in terms of infrastructure, they should really invest in, say, for example, what Barrister Choudhury suggested, case management softwares, right? Or even if, say, for example, you were to look at OCR softwares, even something as simple as OCR, right? You have a PDF that's scanned, but it's all image. At the end of the day, you're unable to search through it unless you have those softwares available with you. These are very fundamental issues, but they hurt you so much. And say, for example, even if you were to look at other softwares like e-libraries, for example. Now, most often, whenever an intern used to go to a chamber and used to practice and used to start working there, the work that is expected of an intern is in assistance insofar as legal research is concerned, or in preparing notes, or just attending court proceedings and possibly giving minutes of what really happened in the court, right? This is what largely an intern is supposed to do when they are actually working in an office. Now, if you were to go back to these three things, 2 or 3 tasks that an intern has to do, attending court proceedings is fine because naturally you just have to do it online. So that's not an issue, right? Preparing notes, that's not an issue. Doing research, again, if you have access to those softwares, that's not an issue. But necessarily, people who did not have those infrastructural facilities available with them, or did not have that access to online research or online data, or those softwares that enable them to work online, obviously that's going to be a big roadblock for them. So therefore, the ability to switch will obviously be hindered. So insofar as these interns are concerned who are seeking to possibly seek internship opportunities, or even if, for example, you were to look at recruitment opportunities, I think the threshold will still be the same. At the end of the day, I think educational institutions really need to realize that somewhere down the line, the Supreme Court is understanding, and not just the Supreme Court, but several high courts across the country are also understanding that online filing is here to stay, right? Online proceedings are here to stay. And although I hate to say this, that COVID has been a big bane in everybody's life, but it definitely has fast-tracked that kind of progress and shift that we needed to do as a legal profession and as a legal community to switch from physical mode to the online mode, which was absolutely necessary. And as a result of that, now what has happened is that now, for example, you consider the High Court of Gujarat, for example. It's now started live stream proceedings. Never before in the history of the country did any High Court undertake live streamings, right? So now you have proceedings that are being live streamed. You have Supreme Court that has never considered online filing, that has now adopted it and is very well taking it. You have judges who were completely, should I say, technologically challenged. They would see a computer and they would just tremble at the sight of dealing with a machine. And now you have those judges who are now dealing with those softwares, who are now reading their files online, who are reading their files on a computer as opposed to a hard copy in front of them. So what I would really say is that the real, should I say, difficulty for any student or for any educational institution is only going to be to develop that infrastructure and to invest in that infrastructure, knowing that this is to stay and this is not something that will just go away in a few months.
Thank you, Shreeyash. You reminded me how much conservative organizations have to deal with the crisis in a very, as you say, fast way. I remember I used to work in United Nations, and over 30 years, we were trying at least to reduce some bureaucracy, some paperwork in the Security Council, in the General Assembly. There were proposals to move things online, and it never worked because the member states always wanted to do it physically. But only for a few months, since March, they all moved online. So all those who are very much resisting the online and the digital had to do it anyway. So those crises are really interesting, that they give us the chance to accelerate what had to be accelerated anyway. And if we look back, the United Nations was created out of the biggest crisis of the Second World War. So COVID might be also an opportunity really to move fast and to create a better world, what they call green, build back better. Now, Erik, back to you. You mentioned how innovative Tilburg University and the law school has been already. So definitely, we should definitely advise our students to take postgraduate degrees in Netherlands and in Birmingham, obviously, because you are doing so well. Please tell us a little bit more. How do you think the future of jobs, the startups, the flexibility, the reskilling will go? What we also see a lot, and even before COVID, is this creation of startups, incubators, entrepreneurial cells. Students need to be prepared to self-employ themselves. To put it bluntly, they don't need simply to file applications and expect interviews. They have to do different things because of the flexibility and the hybridity of the future market. Do you think students will be able to do that? And what can we as faculty do to help them? Please.
Well, that's a very interesting question. Okay, yeah, so a bit of history, just 20 seconds history, and then I will answer your question. When I started as an in-house counsel, the only thing we did was legal work. Actually, the company I worked for, we had a library, a legal library, and we had 3 librarians within the legal department. They disappeared, I can tell you, they disappeared a while ago. But this was like the 2000s still, okay? And then the 2010s, all of a sudden things started to change. The lawyers, they were not viewed as in-house lawyers anymore. They became business partners. And all of a sudden we had to understand the business much better. So the questions that we received became more like business style questions. And this meant for me, because then I realized I was teaching my students that well, this is not what practice needs. So I had to make more lawyers, but with a business sense, right? Because we have this is an international business law program. So I had to explain business to them. That's why I started to introduce them to startups, as you mentioned. And I set up some collaborations with an incubator and an accelerator here in the Netherlands, where they can help. And some of the students actually, they build a legal accelerator, using also legal students, students that I have to help startups. I think similar to what happened in kind of pro bono work that was mentioned, what happened in Birmingham. And that works really well because the students like this a lot. All of a sudden they did not have to wear a suit. They could just go there with a hoodie and just give legal advice to them, which was kind of interesting. You saw the transformation. Now we are in the 2020s, and believe it or not, what I see now is that we are not only a business partner, we become actually a co-developer of innovation, which actually means that we should understand the technology much, much better. We should understand how technologists think. We should understand how programmers think. And all of a sudden you see some of the students being involved in blockchain projects or artificial intelligence projects, because the companies, many startups in the Netherlands, they have an AI product, they go to the law firm and ask them, this is my new product, does this comply with the law? But if a lawyer looks at the product and he has no clue what it does, he cannot answer. So what you see now is that a lot of students are very interested in the technology itself. Not that they have to become real technologists, but at least they have to think like a programmer. They have to understand the technology. And this means that we set up some hackathons, legal hackathons, where some of these startups come and present the problems to the students. And then the students come up with the solutions, legal solutions for these startups. It's brilliant, but it's something that needs some work, because what happened in the beginning, if you put a traditional lawyer with a young, let's say, entrepreneur together, the only thing you should do is record it and sell it to Netflix. It's the best show ever. The Office is nothing compared to the fun that you can see when you have a traditional lawyer and a technologist sitting together talking about things, but they cannot understand each other. So we now basically have to train the lawyer to become more like a digital savvy lawyer, which is extremely interesting. First, so I introduced coding for lawyers, artificial intelligence for lawyers. I even brought in a mathematician to teach them something, and that was not, okay, they didn't really accept it because most of the law students thought we went to law school to never, ever, ever see a mathematician in our lives again, and now you bring them in class. But it worked. It worked. And what you see is that lots of students are extremely interested in this new world and become a co-designer of the new world. And I think that's what law schools have to realize. So I don't say stop whatever we do and focus only on the technology, but there's a huge opportunity for law firms to offer not law, yeah, I call it law and technology, but it's more than just privacy law. It's basically making the lawyer a real co-creator, a real partner for the technologists to help co-design the better future that you mentioned. And it works really well.
Very, very good to hear that. Wonderful. Lisa, you're the next to tell us a bit more. But before that, I receive an interesting question for all of us to think about if you decide. And it brings exactly this kind of innovation and reimagination. Do you believe setting up an internship bank in collaboration with law firms and organizations will help build a stronger legal fraternity? And I wonder whether that could be the case. As you mentioned, we need to utilize the new technology, the blockchain, where the law firms can, instead of recruiting one-to-one to a particular candidate, they can open up, and law associations can help with that, to advertise, to the whole of the industry, not to a specific firm, and to seek exactly that possibility of hybrid recruitment or flexible recruitment, working 20% in one firm and 70% in another firm and so on. Excellent idea, internship bank, where all firms advertise their opportunities, even projects, and they recruit this way. Lisa, you are the next. We have 5 minutes left, so bear in mind, I want to give a final word to everyone after that, so please be brief.
Okay, thank you. So I'll try and answer the question at the same time as dealing with the technology point, if I may. So I think one of the challenges for law schools everywhere in the world is that their law students have got different views of where they want to go after law school. And so you've got some students that will be wanting to go in-house as lawyers, particularly in Europe, where that is an increasing trend. So they'll be employed, whether as advocates or as transactional lawyers. You've got people who want to go into more traditional legal practice, some of whom will be looking in the direction of commercial practice, but some will be looking more at civil liberties, human rights, and personal law matters, and they're often going into small firms or NGOs which don't have the same level of infrastructure or funding necessarily, so they find it harder to be able to capitalize on the technological innovation because they just don't have the investment. Then you've got others who will go into non-law organizations but use their legal skills, and they may go into international organizations and others, and so you're trying to deal with all of those things at once. Now, if I pick up on Erik's point, if I may, about the technology side of things, it's certainly something that law schools in the UK have been looking at. And in Birmingham, we've set up an MSc, which will start in September. So it's a Master of Science, but it's run out of a law school in conjunction with the Computer Science School. And it's an MSc in Responsible Data Science. It's primarily aimed at lawyers, so people who've done undergraduate or JD degrees, who then want to learn more about technology and technological innovation, such that they are able to think through some of the ethical and legal issues, and to partner with, whether it's in-house, whether it's as a consultant, or whether it's in a law firm. And so to do that, they need to know a bit about computer science. They do a couple of modules on that. They need to do design thinking. They need to do entrepreneurship, because they need to understand the questions coming to them so that they can think through some of the things that those organizations won't necessarily have considered. And some of that might be about data privacy, but some of it's about ethics, some of it's about algorithms, some of it's about natural justice and explicable algorithms, so that people can challenge decisions that have been reached through algorithms, whether that's decisions made by private companies on things like mortgage applications or lending, or whether it's the state making use of things to be able to trigger benefits or disbenefits. And through that, the only real way to get that, proper understanding is through placements. And so we've been very lucky to partner with Accenture, which is a large consulting firm, which itself will offer placements to our students, but also their clients will offer placements to their students, to develop a bank of placements for students that come through that, so that they can do modules with us in computer science and maths. They're going to have to do compulsory maths, and also legal and technical and ethical modules with us also, as well as placements. Now, that's just one program, and of course that's a niche program. It won't be of appeal to everybody by any means, but I think there are lots of things like this that are developing, which were already there, were being considered, were being set up, but the fact that COVID has profoundly changed the way in which we're all working has accelerated that. And on that, I'll stop to leave a bit of time.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We have briefly, only 1 minute left. So I want each of you simply, and I know many students are listening this particular section because they are those who are in need of placement and recruitment. What is your final message, very briefly, 2 words? How should students prepare for the future of
take
legal?
minutes, don't worry. Yeah.
Please, Khaled, very briefly.
They should be patient. They should not stop learning. The charity will pass, will survive, but the thirst for knowledge should carry on, and they must be prepared for the future. As I told everyone, that we should think the DDRS method, the digital dispute resolution methodology, they should watch something that should be equipped for the future.
Thank you very much, Khaled. Shreeyash, very briefly, final message to the students.
Right. I would say that educational institutions should adapt and evolve. and students should just be patient because there's a lot in store. Yeah.
Thank you. Erik, what would you?
Okay, students, they should be curious and have an open mind and try to create an online presence already, because that's what companies are looking more and more at.
Excellent. So patience, open-minded, curiosity. Lisa, what one last word?
Take any opportunity. There are opportunities out there. They look non-traditional. Don't worry that because it's not traditional, it won't be valued by future employers. Far from it. They will probably be able to ask you questions about the opportunity you took up and your curiosity.
Brilliant. My pleasure to give back the floor to Professor Rajkumar, the Vice Chancellor.
Thank you very much, VESSELIN, for beautifully moderating this panel. And I want to thank all the panelists. What an extraordinary tour de force on the kind of opportunities that young lawyers and law graduates are going to have, from artificial intelligence to robotics to machine learning to entrepreneurship, going beyond the law. By the way, Professor VERMEULEN, I have been running away from mathematics for the last over 25 years, since it finally caught up with me when I became the Vice Chancellor, when I had to look at budgets. So I know what you mean when that type of, in a way, the imagination that each one of you provided for the future of law graduates was truly remarkable. So I would like to particularly take this moment to thank Professor Lisa WEBLEY, Professor ERIK VERMEULEN, Barrister Dr. KHALED HAMID CHOWDHURY, Mr. SHREEYASH LALIT, and of course, VESSELIN POPOVSKI for being part of this thematic session. Many of us, not just the students, truly enjoyed the perspectives that you shared with us. We deeply appreciate the time that you've given in contributing to this thematic session.